Hi there. Thanks for joining me for this video. This is the second video in Massage for Everyone series. I'm Vita King Blanchard from Rooted Arts. And today my partner Eric has volunteered to be the model for what I'll be demonstrating. So I talked in the first video about setting the stage, about sound, temperature, and various things. I highly recommend that you go back and watch that one. Some things to keep in mind for today. When you're putting your hands on someone, you want to make sure that your nails are very short, right? Or if you are going to keep long nails, then just be very conscious that you're not going directly in on anything because it'll very quickly become uncomfortable. So I have Eric on my table, and you can also work on the floor or the bed, whatever you have available. You just want to stay conscious of keeping good planes of motion when you're working. And just as a reminder, right, the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable your client will be, or your person that you're working on. So I'm going to put this, which is a bolster, under Eric's knees. What happens when, I'm just going to move this sheet and blanket a little bit. And communication, just as a reminder, is so super important, right? Because I'm above him, I'm giving him a gift. So these things create a power dynamic. So you can see, if I move his arm, that when our knees are not supported, it creates extra tension in our back, right? So our back kind of has to strain to figure out how to be flat on the table. And when we put something under the knees, it takes that away. So that is the first step. So I'm just going to put this under your knees. There you go. And that just kind of flattens out the back and makes him a little bit more comfortable, right?
Right.
In and of itself. So I'm going to cover him back up. One of the reasons that I'm always going to have a sheet and a blanket on someone, and I'm going to adjust the room temperature to accommodate that, is because it adds a feeling of security, a barrier, right? Even for people that we're close to, again, this power dynamic exists. So anything that helps create security can just really support having a relaxation response. And while I can see what's happening with his body, you can also just feel and palpate the bony protrusions to really get a sense of it, until you can also see how the way that the blanket and sheets are lying indicates that. So today I'm going to be demonstrating just a simple assessment on the table as someone's lying in this supine or face up position, which already can be very relaxing. I'm going to be doing some simple stretches to do alignment, and that is going to already encourage the fascia to unwind. Our fascia is 3D connective tissue that covers every area of the body. It covers our smallest muscle fibers, our organs, our tendons, everything. It just wraps around everything like cellophane. And unwinding that can have really profound effects on relaxation. So I'm going to start by looking at his knees and his feet and seeing whether his feet are even, whether his knees are even, whether the bolster is even under his knees. And he's doing pretty good. So these are his knees. His left knee is just a little bit lower. And that already indicates to me that there's probably some low back tension that can unwind. Do you think maybe there's a little bit of low back tension, Eric?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So So the first thing I'm going to do is just undrape his feet. And then I'm just sliding my hands down the back of his ankles to lift his feet up and grab them by the heels. I have a really gentle touch. On a scale of 0 to 10, Eric, where would you say this pressure or intensity is?
This is about a 2 for me.
Okay. So what I'm going to do from this gentle position is just apply slightly more pressure. So that's probably a 3 or 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just leaning backwards. And while I am pulling, I'm allowing my weight to do the work for me. And I'm supporting myself so that, again, I'm keeping it in a very comfortable, gentle range. And this just begins aligning his body. And then I can check back in to see what's happened with his knees and the bolster and adjust that. Now I'm going to go up to his head, right? I like to work both ends of the body in kind of an ongoing circle to start to introduce touch, because just loving touch can be really healing. And it begins to create this air of comfort and reinforce that invitation to communicate. So I have a stool here that I'm going to sit on. And I'm just going to lift up his head and do a gentle hold to kind of move his hair out of the way and help his head become in alignment. And the line that I'm looking at here is from his chin down to his belly, his pubic area. And I'm checking because I want it to be balanced in between his shoulders, right? And I'm also keeping conscious how comfortable I am. Because if I start to feel uncomfortable, that's going to go into my touch. So from this position, if I put my hands, I have one hand, this back left one, under the base of his skull, and I'm gently lifting so that I can put my other hand under his cervical vertebrae, where the base of his neck joins his shoulders, right there. And I can lift from there. And that creates just a slight lift. It's going to allow me to put my other hand in and kind of walk in there, just lift up. You see, I can just pop up his chest from here and straighten out his torso a little bit more. How are you feeling, Eric?
Great.
Great. So that's already starting a relaxation response, right? I'm already kind of supporting his body and reminding it how it likes to be. Now I'm going to stand back up. And again, thinking about keeping my own plane of motion good and comfortable and calm. I'm just slightly depressing his shoulders with an outward motion. So I'm pressing down and slightly out. And this is again at that low pressure level. What would you say this pressure is here?
About a 3 or 4.
Okay. And you want to check in because while it might feel really light, sometimes we can, be surprised with what it feels like for the other person, especially if they have injury or tension happening. So I'm just pressing out. And his shoulders are already starting to release and drop down. And from here, I'm also going to press down on his chest, not towards the table. Instead, I'm pressing toward his feet. How's that?
Great.
And then I'm going to take that down. So I'm going to go from shoulder to hip, right? Shoulder to hip and shoulder to knee, and kind of create that same elongating. And what I'm thinking about in terms of the bony areas that I'm using as my measurements to get a sense of where his alignment is and what's happening in his body are his hip bones. They stick out, right? They're easy to feel. And again, you'll get used to recognizing them. And his shoulders, his clavicle, checking out where those bones are, his knees. So I'm just going to start by putting one hand on his shoulder, one hand above his knee, not directly on his knee, because that would be really uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. And just pushing slightly toward the table, but mostly I'm pushing toward his head and towards his feet with each of these. And again, I'm keeping conscious of my own posture, making sure that my shoulders don't collect tension. And I'm using my body as leverage to create this stretch instead of using my hands, which would make your hands really tired really fast. What pressure would you say this is at, Eric?
About 4.
So that's like right at the top of where we want to be, especially if you're doing this at home and you're not clear on where the sensitive areas are, or what we call endangerment sites, where there's lots of nerve endings or sensitive, damageable soft tissue, right? As long as we're staying in this gentle range of comfort, we're really not going to hurt the person that we're working on, and we're just going to support them in relaxing and unwinding. So that opened up his hip a little bit. Now I'm going to go back in, and this focuses more on this area in between his ribs and in between his hip and his shoulder. It's more focused. I'm just going to do a hold between the shoulder and the hip. And what pressure is this?
This is a 2 or 3.
2 or 3. So I'm just going to increase it by pushing my hands out a little bit more, the one towards his head and the one towards his feet. And where are we at now?
About a 4.
About a 4. So you're staying in that nice, good area. And I'm just holding until I feel the body start to relax, which you can feel as the tissues release. And you'll develop sensitivity for that the more you practice. And I can also kind of see it in his face, right? He'll start to look a little bit sleepy or like he doesn't really want to talk or be bothered with anything. He's being very kind. That's why you always want to be grateful. I'm always grateful when I have a model or someone helping me. So just to show you again from this side, I'm putting my hand just like in the depression of the shoulder is the palm of my hand, and then pushing out towards his shoulder, towards his head. And then on his knee, I'm right above the knee, kind of gripping it on the side, and I'm using the bones that stick out here around the knee, but not the kneecap because that's a sensitive area, as my gripping points. And then pushing in both directions. And see, he kind of closes his eyes when I do it, which just shows that it feels okay. It feels pretty good.
It feels wonderful.
Yeah. And then I'm going to do the same thing again between his shoulder and his hip. And just put my palm in the shoulder depression and my palm against his hip bone, the heel of my hand, to really get like a nice grip there. And then simply push out. And then you can just go back in and check. And, mindfully touching and getting a sense of where the bones are and where there is still tension or tightness gives a sense of where you want to work. And I'm just doing a little rubbing on the shoulder because it feels tight. This is a very light pressure. What number would you say this is at?
A 2.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of encouraging the body to move and getting its attention, letting it know that we're doing some relaxation. And then I'm going to check back in with his hips. And I can see that I can feel or see that this hip, his right one, is a little bit higher towards the ceiling than his left. So I'm going to check on his knees and see how they are. And there's just a slight imbalance, right? That seems to be focused around this hip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up on his left hip, but I'm going to show you on this side because you won't be able to see on the other side. So I'm just kind of wrapping my hands around that hip bone and slightly lifting up, nice and slowly, right? We don't want to make any jarring, sudden motions, and then releasing. And because that is actually the side that is higher on him, I'm going to go back on this side so that I can do it. And so I'm going to hold it a little bit longer on the other side. What pressure does this feel like?
A 3.
3. So I'm just going to hold it and allow the muscles to kind of release themselves. And then I'm going to come back in, and I can see that this hip that there is more balance between the two of them. And so I'm going to hold this hip to remind it that I want it to be down. It's kind of like a cue to the body to release itself. And as I do that, I'm going to actually lift up on his leg. So I'm just lifting along the outside, a gentle lift and release. Lift and release. So like a gentle rocking motion to help bring balance back in. And to make sure that has done it, and I'll just show you from this direction. So what I was doing was holding the opposing hip, and then doing a gentle lift and release. Lift and release. And then I'll just check in on his knees, and they're much more even. And I come down to his feet, and they're looking pretty good. So how are you feeling, Eric?
I'm feeling pretty good.
So as you can see, just doing a simple alignment assessment is already working on the body and already creating relaxation and helping our loved ones to just ease away their stress. Really simply showing up to the body with attention and intention to support it in unwinding itself can be enough to allow our bodies to relax themselves. Our bodies always amaze me because they're so good at healing. They're so good at returning back to that place of homeostasis, as long as we give them the room to do so. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. Again, please check out the first one if you haven't seen it yet, and join us again next Saturday at 12:30 for Massage for Everyone number 3. I love me, I love you, I love us. I'll see you soon.